Welcome back to EU Decoded, a podcast by the EPP Group in the European Parliament. I am your host, Kitty Liddon, and today we're going to delve into the problems posed by the Kremlin's notorious blacklists. These blacklists target European politicians, journalists, officials, and civil society actors who oppose Russian aggression and promote democratic values. The compilation of these lists is a tactic that seeks to intimidate and silence legitimate voices, and they represent a significant challenge to European democracy. Despite denying that any such lists exist, the Kremlin has in recent months significantly expanded its blacklist of EU citizens to include a substantial number of elected MEPs and other public officials. These individuals have been targeted for publicly supporting Ukraine, for backing EU sanctions, and for defending human rights and democratic norms. In this discussion, we are joined by MEP Andrej Kolar from Czech Republic and MEP Mika Aaltola from Finland. Welcome to you both.
Thank you very much.
Now, Mr. Aaltola, you recently raised this issue in a memo, saying that Russian intelligence maintains a database of roughly 4,000 to 5,000 names of people who have been judged as hostile to Kremlin interests. You argued that the ambiguity surrounding these lists is inherent to the danger they pose. Could you tell me more about that?
Well, it's basically a mental game of deterrence. So you don't know what list you are on. It could be a relatively innocent non-entry list to Russia. Well, who wants to go there in any case? But it could be something else as well. So there's multiple different sorts of lists. So it can range from non-entry list to target list, or even a list of physical harm. And so it's not a child's game that they are playing. They know that it is going to have an effect on the politicians, on the journalists, on the kind of public discussions we are having. So they aim for self-censorship, so you won't get to the list if you are acting and behaving and keeping your hands away from things of Russian world, Ruski Mir. So for politicians it can be harmful. It can lead into bots attacking you, artificial intelligence, campaigning against you, so Russia actually putting a lot of money behind your opponents or maligning you online. Or then it can be death threats like what were sent to Belgian politicians when they were handling the Russian frozen assets. Or it can be physical little intimidation against your family members or yourself. So death threats. Nasty messages, leaving notes to your close to your apartment or your home, so reminding you that they exist, breaking the window of your car. So they have different ways of psychologically influencing you, and they know what they are doing. They like this subversive, transnational suppression of democracy type of activities.
And Mr. Kolar, you personally experienced pressure from the Kremlin in 2018. Can you tell us a little bit more about your experience?
How much time do we have?
Why don't you start and we'll see.
Well, to make the story, the very long story short, I was elected a mayor of one of the districts of Prague, the capital of the Czech Republic, where the Russian embassy is situated, in 2014. And in 2015, the Russians have started what I would call a hybrid campaign against the municipality which I governed, and me personally, because we happened to have a statue of Marshal Konev, one of the Soviet marshals who led the Red Army into Europe at the end of the Second World War. And the monument was quite controversial, both given the fact who the figure there was. Marshal Konev was not only a hero of the Second World War, but there was a lot of controversy connected to him after the war. And also the fact that the statue was sort of left behind after the fall of communism in 1989, when most of the Soviet monuments were actually removed from public space in Prague and the rest of the Czech Republic, people felt that this monument should also be gone. And in 2015, we were for the first time sort of questioned by the public whether we want to keep the statue in the park where it was or remove it. My reply back then was that we shouldn't remove it, but use it as sort of an educational tool to sort of tell the people who the figure depicted by the statue is and what actually happened after the end of the Second World War, and what actually the Soviet Union did in Central Europe. The Russians probably took it as some kind of a push, you know, and as I said, they started using the statue as a tool of a hybrid pressure that they were sort of imposing on our municipality. To sum it up, it all ended in 2020 when the statue was taken down. And of course, as I said, I was the mayor. I was the one who was mainly responsible for this. And since 2019, when the decision to remove the statue was taken by the municipality, the pressure increased. And as Mika described all the forms of pressure that the Russians use, that's what I experienced actually. My assistants were opening mail with white powder falling out from it, bullets, you know, in the envelopes. I was getting, my Facebook was flooded with threats, and it all ended up with me being put under police protection for almost a year. So, yeah.
Wow. And did you know that it was the Kremlin?
Well, there were hints that we could tell that it was them. We even engaged in talks with the Russian embassy, and we were trying to offer them a sort of a peaceful solution to the whole problem, because the main thing was that someone always had an urge to spill red or pink paint over the statue when it came to some anniversary connected to the Soviet Union, be it the anniversary of the end of the Second World War or the 1968 anniversary of the invasion of the Warsaw Pact armies into Czechoslovakia. And when I think back of the whole thing, it seems to me that it was the Russians who were actually sort of, you know, damaging the statue to just create unrest and see how we will react. They were also using a lot of proxies they had in the Czech Republic, members of the Communist Party, these so-called nationalists, you know, who are spreading disinformation all over the web and social media, and using all kinds of media outlets to sort of spread lies against us. Then they even had help from active politicians in the Czech Republic, you know, which was kind of scary when you saw people who were elected into public offices openly siding the Russian regime and spreading lies, actually. That's something you don't want to see and you don't want to hear. So actually our reaction in 2019 was inevitable, because, as I said, we were trying to solve the problem peacefully. We were offering the statue to the Russians, to the Russian embassy, for them to take it, you know. They refused this. They said that if we were to remove the statue or manipulate it in any way, that would mean that we are supporting Nazism. That was the first time when I heard the narrative they are using now in Ukraine. And that was, 2 years before the invasion, 4 years before they invaded Kiev.
Wow.
So they, for example, called me personally a Gauleiter, which was a member of the Nazi party back in the Nazi era. So, you know, it was quite an interesting period of time.
I can imagine. And the secrecy around these practices must make it very difficult to sort of effectively respond, especially as, from what I gather, there are several different lists.
Yes, well, there are lists, blacklists, and you never know if you are on a what type of list. As I said, it can be a target list, physical targeting, political campaigning against you, causing problems for your political career, harming officials. You know, a lot of that is usually repressed, so people don't notify the authorities. But the other route is also very clear, that not all of the intelligence services in all of the member states notify, even though if they know that a person is on a particular blacklist. So there should be a duty to notify.
They don't necessarily notify the person who is on the list.
No, that's at least my investigations when I've been talking to different people who have been on the list, and there are a lot of members of European Parliament that are blacklisted. A lot of members of national parliaments are on it. A lot of journalists are on it. So it is a little bit mysterious how it works, and that's the part of the kind of the cognitive effect of it. So you don't know, and therefore you shy away from taking positions that might be triggering any harm to you, to your political career or your reputation or to your family. But we know when Russians were approaching Kiev, when the war started, they had a list of thousands of people that they would have been annihilating. So these lists are common practice in the Soviet and in the Russian intelligence and security cultures. So they should be taken seriously. But of course, we as a representative of European democracy here in Brussels, we lack a lot of the safeguards. So there's no intelligence service at the level of European Union. So we are protected in some cases by our national authorities. But it should be elevated, this safeguarding of European democracy, also at the level of representatives. Because the fear is, as has happened in some of the member states, that people do not enter into politics because they want to get out of that harm's way that Russia might be causing. So it is suppressing democracy in multiple different ways. And of course, different layers exist. They're also suppressing and targeting Russian diaspora in the West. We know the cases of radiological weapons being used against Russian dissidents. The nerve gas that was used in UK on NATO territory. So Russians they are not shying away from any methods. They know that this works. Like in the case of Belgium, it worked. Targeting of officials with death threats, drone operations here, and then a massive disinformation campaigning. And Belgian government decided that it wants to keep it hands off of the Russian business. It didn't want to take risk on its shoulders on this matter of Russian frozen funding being given to Ukraine. So what do you think? If they were successful, are they not going to be repeating this similar type of hybrid activities where blacklists are one key part of it?
And Mr. Koller, thanks to your experience, do you have a very sort of precise idea of how the EU can safeguard and protect individuals who are targeted by these coercive measures?
Yeah, that's a hard question. I think my case was a bit different because we decided to go public with everything that was happening, So when we actually had talks with the Russians, we informed the media. So the Russian side was always, not always, also under a bit of a pressure, because the people were sort of expecting some kind of response, though their reactions were how they were. And I would say that it turned a big part of the public in the Czech Republic against the Russian embassy and the way how they responded. Of course, as I said, they had proxies they were using, but it was quite widely covered by the media, the whole process that we have taken. So I think this is one of the things that is quite necessary, to sort of point your finger at the Russians and make people know that they are the bad guys. Because once you go public with this, and once you sort of make people aware of these actions, once you get support from the officials, I know I said that there were politicians in the Czech Republic who were openly siding the Russians, but those weren't the guys in power, as I would call it, We had the government backing us because they just couldn't afford something to happen, We had journalists who were reporting every week of what's going on. One of the things that happened when I was under the police protection was that the Secret Service actually discovered that it later turned out there was sort of a game inside the Russian embassy, but they came up with an investigation that a Russian diplomat supposedly brought poison, ricin, into the Czech Republic, which was intended for me and 2 other mayors in Prague. That's why I was, for example, kept in a secret place for 20 days, you know. But again, this was covered by the media. So the response from the Czech officials was always very strong and telling the Russians, listen, if anything happens to this guy, we know you are the ones responsible. So I think that one of the main responses there should be is actually make the Russians know that you know of their intentions, you know, so that they do not try anything foolish, as I would call it. We had a case of a terrorist attack conducted by Russia in the Czech Republic in 2014 when they blew up an ammunition depot. So we can actually see that they are capable of doing the really nasty things. You know, Mika mentioned the nerve gas being actually used in the United Kingdom. They were, I think, trying to assassinate a Bulgarian weapons dealer in 2013, 14 or 15 or something like that. So, I mean, they are not afraid of doing really nasty stuff, you know. But once you make them know that you know, they try to be careful or maybe not sort of wander into real action, and they stay sort of in this kind of like online intimidation and threats and maybe even more turn to the, I would call it useful idiots that they have in the various countries, you know. And then of course it's up to everyone to sort of make up their minds if they want to give up or give in or resist, you know. When I was asked by the media what my reaction is to the fact that Russia actually one of the reactions that the Russians had to our case, to the removal of the statue, was that they came up with a new law in 2020, which was retrospective and said that anybody who actually harms any monuments dedicated to Russian war heroes will be punished. That's how I ended on the blacklist, you know, because they actually wrote a law that was inspired by my case, as I would call it. And I think that I was even sentenced to 5 years into prison in absentia in Russia. You know, but the fact that everybody knew about the case meant that, or at least I believe, meant that the Russians actually didn't try to do anything real, you know, that it all stayed in this sort of virtual kind of world of psychological pressure and trying to make me sort of shift away from my intentions. When I was asked by the media how I react to these things, I always tell them, well, it sort of empowers me, actually, you know, because the reactions of the Russians show me that I'm doing the things that should be done.
Yes.
You know?
So
what the response of the EU should be, I think, again, let them know that we know, because I think that the game they are playing is trying to actually raise fear. And again, as Mika mentioned, the response of the Belgian government is totally wrong, I think, you know. They just gave up.
They gave up.
They gave up. And that's the worst response you can have, because as long as you keep the Russians thinking that they are in power and they have the strength, then of course they will go deeper and deeper, you know. So don't give them the space. Let them know that we know. Let them know that if anything happens, they will pay a price. We must find the instruments to actually let them pay the price. I think that when it comes to sanctions, for example, we must ensure that the sanctions are really effective, that there are no ways how they can bypass them. And I think it's actually time to stop fearing these things, you know.
Well, you've obviously had such an admirable reaction to what happened to you. But Mr. Alatola, in your memo, you spoke about tier 0 self-censorship as a sort of real problem.
Well, that happens that when you are kind of hesitating, you're entering into this field that you have to take high political decisions. You have to vote and you have to take initiatives, and then you're wondering if you should or not. And then you remember that you have heard from your colleagues that there are these lists. So they have this self-deterrence effect that leads into self-censorship. So you avoid being haunted by troll farms or pot factories, different types of campaigning methods against you. So politicians shy naturally away from all of that. And then the fears of them coming after your family. The phrase was used in Belgium case that they will burn down your house. That is highly significant because it is wider than one person type of activity. But yes, I agree with you and I applaud your reaction that it is a badge of honor that we have been defending democracy and there is this risk. It comes with the job of being representative of European democracy.
Yes.
So it is unavoidable part, and we should have tools. Yes, for example,
and what steps? Yes.
Yeah, sanctioning those officials who do this blacklisting, figuring the game out so that it is turned against the Russians. And you were also correct on the attribution part. So Russia depends on the deniability. So they would say that this is nonsense what they are talking about. Nothing like this exists. And you Europeans, you have your sanctions lists. And so you should look into mirror. So that's the reaction. So when things become undeniable, they usually run away. Exactly. Because they know that they are on the losing side on the bigger picture of things. So they don't want these things to be attributed because it causes further sanctions pressure, so it turns against itself, the whole game that they are playing. So we should be much bolder in our activities, identifying these lists, how they work, how they are part of the overall hybrid war that Russia is engaging in Europe, inside Europe. So they are not outside of European gates, they are actively here with their representatives and agents. And we should a little bit go after them. So it's not only shielding democracy, it is also having a sword, having something active when it comes to Russian operations.
Not just passive, not just reaction, not just reacting to what happens.
Yes, at least putting some obstacles on what they are doing. And this attribution issue is very good, that actually truth shall set you free. So it is much easier to exist in daylight, in sunlight, than try to run away from difficult decisions, political decisions that we have to make, and we are doing every week here at the European Parliament. But journalists are also involved in these lists and the effect on journalism. So we should study self-censorship in Europe a bit more to understand the scope of the challenge that we have and how this transnational repression of democracy is actually working. Is it working to prevent us from doing the right things? And if so, what we can do to stop that from happening?
And of course, this is only one of many tactics that the Kremlin is using. Yes. And you are a member of the European Democracy Shield Committee. What are the most pressing challenges coming from Russia?
Well, of course, election interference is a key part.
Interference, yeah.
Blacklists, they also tied into election interference because, if you go to, I don't know, your Facebook page, perhaps we can still see the active operations that the Russians are carrying out through their bots. Yeah. One good thing about your reaction is that you create visibility to those bots that are there, because the average Facebook user might be thinking that those are authentic people who are just complaining about bad decisions, but they are not. They are organized, systematized machine that is run in a very effective way. Yes. Russia gives you your opponents kind of a campaigning machine. So they are actively participating in European democratic elections, and that's one of the key parts of what we are trying to do in the democracy field, to create resilience and create attention to these issues, at least make them discernible enough so that people would have the right for ownership over democratic elections, the citizens of Europe, instead of Russians.
Yes.
So these paradoxical decisions that Russians are interfering in the European member states elections, but also more so perhaps with aspirant member states like Moldova, Georgia. They were very successful there. Last weekend in Armenian elections, they were very active. Russians were actually participating in the elections, and they lost, and now they're complaining that something bad must have happened because they didn't win. You know, these things tie together: blacklist, election interference, then hybrid, more kind of a military side of things, drones flying to eastern flank NATO member states and European Union member states because of the Russian electronic warfare, very active, new, innovative ways that they are using. But they are under the threshold type of tools that they are using, and they are based on the deniability. So if you do not give them the cover of deniability, then usually they run away.
And Mr. Kola, are you still seeing some of the consequences of everything that has happened to you even now,
So,
even having moved?
Yes.
Yes, still now?
I'm a Nazi, of course. It's one of the little things. My Facebook account is flooded with these troll accounts, and I don't know.
6 years later.
Yes, of course. And you know, there are still people in the Czech Republic who have an urge to actually remind me of how bad I am, even today. I think that one of the mistakes that we are making is that we still give space to what I call Russian Trojan horses. And we even have these people here in the European Parliament. You know, there are people who are very vocal in favor of Russia, who are advocating for Russia, who are defending Russia, who are saying that Russia is you know, they are not seeing Russia as the victim. So I think this is one of the things that we should focus on, to actually not give up, not give in. I think perseverance is one of the key things, you know. We must point our fingers at these people who are openly siding Russia inside the European Union, inside our member states, the political parties who are apologetic to Russia, for example, you know. And
in
when
many
it comes
cases,
to
they are also receiving funding from Russia, so
exactly,
they are on the white list.
Yeah, that's why I call them Trojan horses. You know, we are actively pulling Russian Trojan horses inside our European gates. You know, that's one of the mistakes we are making. It was, I think, one of the problems that Europe was facing and the member states were facing. I'm not talking about Finland, for example. I'm not talking about the Baltic states. But surprisingly, for example, in the Czech Republic, it took us very long to actually realize that something like hybrid campaigns actually exists, you know, that disinformation are a huge problem in the Czech Republic, and not only in the Czech Republic, you know. I think that our governments, the European Union, should have a real plan how to tackle disinformation, how to debunk them, how to inform the public, how to work with the people, how to educate people, how to talk about freedom of speech, for example, you know. Bots who are active online, should they enjoy the freedom of speech? I don't think so. You know, should they participate in elections? No way. So when we talk, for example, about the approach to social media, how it should be actually serviced or governed, you know, I think that when we talk about accounts and fake accounts, one of the solutions may be to actually have some kind of personal check. You know, if the accounts had to be personalized, then one of the half of the problem would be solved.
Yes, making
because
sure that
the
there's an
bots would
actual
be gone.
person behind
Exactly.
every
But
yeah.
platforms, they know what is authentic behavior.
Yeah.
They know
Exactly.
and they don't remove those because they want to keep their user numbers very high.
Yeah.
So they would have the responsibility, the major platforms, to actually deny the Russians the voice inside Europe because it is inauthentic, it is fake, it's manipulative, and it's targeting us.
Yes.
So I think we actually have to overcome the inner fear that we have, when, for example, when it comes to social media, when it comes to free debates and all that, there is a huge misunderstanding of various freedoms. For me, the freedom of speech is just as any other freedom, With freedom comes responsibility as well. But people feel today that, when it comes to freedom of speech, they don't have any responsibility when they are online.
Yes.
And of course our adversaries know this and they take advantage of this,
They
So
exploit it,
I think that education, media education, is one of the key things that we should focus on in the European Union.
Thank you so much, both of you, for your insights. It's been a really interesting conversation, and thank you for everything that you're doing to counter all of these problems. So, as we have heard, these blacklists aim to intimidate and silence legitimate democratic voices. They isolate individuals and they deter any criticism of the Kremlin. And they undermine the EU's ability to speak as a unified voice on foreign policy and human rights issues. This is one more Russian practice that represents a threat to European democratic norms. It's clear that Europe must push back and speak out and take measures to ensure the protection and security of elected representatives and EU citizens. And that's it for this episode of EU Decoded. Join us next time as we explore other EU topics. And in the meantime, follow the EPP Group on social media. Stay informed and stay engaged. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.